Great to have you with us on Wisconsin Public Radio. Larry Meiller here. We're starting the show by talking with you about beekeeping, and we are lucky to have Robert McKinney with us. He's president of MJD Apiary in Milwaukee. Robert keeps his own hives. He produces honey and mentors novice beekeepers. And as we talk with him, I hope you'll join in, wondering how you can start your own beehive, or maybe you have some hives and have questions for Robert about them. Maybe you've got an experience to share. Give us a call. The number is 800-642-1234, 1-800-642-1234. Or you can email us, the email address, ideas@wpr.org, ideas@wpr.org. Robert McKinney, welcome. Thanks for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you've got a lot of hives.
Not that many. I think I've had 35 last year.
35,
yeah.
Okay. And they're located pretty much around Milwaukee?
They're located in a lot of places. I have some in East Troy, some in Hartford, Mequon, Glendale, east side of Milwaukee, north side of Milwaukee, the Hilton Hotel. Yeah, they're all over.
That's pretty cool. And you actually had a little story. Somebody was Clara Kniper was telling me that you helped a hotel in Milwaukee produce their own honey.
Yeah, the Hilton Hotel in downtown Milwaukee. I approached them about 4 years ago, and with the idea of having hives on top of the hotel. I didn't know before I talked to them was that they were planning on having rooftop gardens up there because they want to start producing more herbs and things like that for the restaurant. They have 2 restaurants, the Chop House and the Miller Time Pub. And my idea with the hives for them is that the hives would complete their narrative that they were trying to do. People know that pesticides and things like that kill bees off. So having a hive in your garden, it completes the narrative that your food is clean.
It's a pretty cool idea, and it's been pretty successful with them for sure. Well, here we are in the city. What's your well, let's look at it this. What are the requirements of a location?
It depends on municipalities. Each municipality has different rules and guidelines. Some in Milwaukee, you can only have 2 hives. They have to be 50 feet away from a dwelling. If you go a little farther east to Shorewood, Shorewood allows you to have more hives. If you go a little bit more west, Wauwatosa allows you to have a couple hives, but you have to have your neighbors sign off and give permission saying that it's okay to have the hives. So it depends on the municipality.
Well, what about from the bees' point of view?
Well, from the bees' point of view, as far as things go, raising bees in the city, because a lot of people have gardens, and then you have a lot of parks, so you get more of a mixture of floral in your honey, and that's very interesting. If you when you get wildflower honey, it's just a mixture of flowers in the area.
Sure.
So, say I had hives in Madison, the wildflower honey in Madison would taste different than it would in Milwaukee, because of different flowers. So different flowers contribute to the taste of the honey.
So it's kind of like wine in a way.
It is. It is. I learned something about the grapes. It depends on the soil of the grapes that the soil's grown, the grapes are grown in, and that contributes to the flavor of the wine. It's kind of, well, basically, you can turn honey into wine. So, yeah, that's what it is.
There you go. Well, Mary in Mount Horeb, the area of Mount Horeb, has a question or comment. Let's go there. Hi, Mary.
Hi there. I've heard a lot about kind of collapse of insect populations, and I see a lot of people planting native plants in their yards to encourage native pollinators. I'm curious about how much competition there is between honeybees, which are non-native, and our native pollinator species.
Yeah.
That's very good that you brought that up. A lot of people don't realize that the European honeybee is not native to the United States, to North America. It was brought to North America in about the 1600s by settlers. Along with that, the settlers also brought some of their native food. So here's the thing. When you plant native flowers and things like that, you are attracting native bees, and some you are attracting the honeybees. But at the same time, there are certain plants that you plant for the natives that the honeybees can't access. Like honeybees don't pollinate tomato plants, but you have bumblebees that pollinate tomato plants. So whenever you like Google and you Google food for bees, it usually brings up food for honeybees, because honeybees have such a great PR agent, which is the honey. Our native pollinators, they don't have such a PR agent, but they are very, very excellent pollinators. So you'd have to actually look into the species of bee that you want to encourage, and you look for the food that's specific to them.
Mary, does that help out?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for calling. You can join in too, 800-642-1234. Give a call. I'm looking at, you brought in some of your products that look great, and you do have one buckwheat honey, which I presume was in the honeybees had to be in an area where buckwheat was grown.
That's correct. Like we were talking earlier about how honey has a different flavor based on the flowers, the buckwheat, when you look at that, and you have cranberry over there as well, cranberry came from cranberry pollination. It has a slight little berry ting to it. But that buckwheat, you look at it, it's darker, it's thicker, it's toastier. The flavor is toastier, it's maltier. So like I said, different types of floral produce different types of flavor. And you think about buckwheat pancakes. It's a heavier, heartier pancake. So, yeah.
And then you've got creamed honey, which I'm not sure everybody is familiar with. It's actually kind of maybe a light gold, but it's mostly white.
Yeah. Creamed honey is very interesting. Creamed honey is the same as just any type of wildflower honey. The thing is that honey is 2 parts sugar. It's a fructose and sucrose, and 16% moisture. So when that moisture starts to evaporate, it turns to solid sugar. A lot of people see that crystallized sugar and that solid sugar, and they think, oh, it's bad. But no, that's perfect. That tells you that that's real honey. That's why honey can last forever. So in order to liquefy that honey, you add heat to it. You make a water bath and make it liquid. But what I've done with that creamed honey is I took that solid crystallized honey and I put it into a mixer and I spun it. Spun it. And I spun it till it got smooth. And what happened was it changes the consistency. It's still honey. It doesn't change anything to it, but it changes so it's a different mouthfeel.
Yeah, it is indeed. And then finally you've got what you call kitchen honey.
My Kickin' honey, yeah. My Kickin' honey is an experiment that I actually started last year in March. And that is one of my infused honeys. That's actually infused with a habanero pepper. And it adds a little spice to it. And it's such a versatile honey. A lot of people hear it's infused with habanero. They think it's hot. But I made it so that it adds flavor. So a lot of people use honey for cooking. So it just complements things. I have a dark chocolate candy that I use that Kickin' honey in. And it complements the dark chocolate and the sea salt.
It sounds wonderful. It sounds wonderful to me. Let's go back a bit and talk about what actually happens in the hives. How and why do the bees produce honey?
Okay. What's interesting is that I don't personally like honey. But what we're talking about now is awesome. It's the science that goes on inside that box that I really love. That's what got me, that's what keeps me going. The honey I've been beekeeping for 13 years. I didn't start selling honey until 5 years ago. Honey is just basically a byproduct for me. For the bees, it's their food. They need that to overwinter. We have 20,000 species of bees worldwide. We have 4,000 native to North America and 500 species that are native to Wisconsin. The European honeybee isn't native here. 70% of our native bees, they winter underground and they hibernate. These don't. What they do is they overwinter. So in the winter, what they do is they huddle to keep warm, and they unhinge their wings from their wing muscles and they vibrate. And in order to do that, they need energy. And the sugar from the honey is a carbohydrate, and that gives them the energy they need to keep that hive warm. So inside the hive, it's 80 degrees. Outside the hive, it's negative 20.
That's absolutely amazing. And, you know, the sound is that buzzing sound. Mm-hmm. That's the wings moving, isn't it?
That is their wings. Their wings beat 231 times a second. And what they're doing is, a lot of people think they're angry. No, what they're doing is when they go out and they collect that nectar and they put it into the cells, and they cap over the cells with wax, they have to dry that so that it thickens, so that it turns into the honey that we eat and that they eat. And so they have to dry it out. So if you have a humidifier, that humidifier is bringing out moisture. Well, they're producing that inside the hive, and that's how they're thickening the honey and drying it out.
You know, I'm thinking way back to when Lee Dreyfus was governor of Wisconsin. I remembered him well because I had a class for him when I was a student at the UW. He was a professor here. And he got in trouble when he was a governor because he talked about, he made a comment that seemed disparaging, calling honey bee poop.
You know, I hear that so much. It comes out the wrong end. The honey is actually, if you want to be like that, it's actually bee vomit. Bee poop is poop, so they don't, poop is poop. But the thing is, when they go and they collect nectar, honeybees have, do you know how many stomachs they have?
I do not know. They're not like a cow and have 4, are they?
Well, cows have 1 stomach but 4 chambers.
Yeah, okay.
But honeybees actually have 2 stomachs. They have a food stomach and they have a honey stomach. And what happens is when they go out and they collect that nectar, they suck that nectar into that first stomach, that honey stomach, and it mixes with a bunch of enzymes. And when they get back to the hive, the foragers spit the honey into the mouth of another bee, which is called a house bee. And that bee takes that and puts it in their honey stomach. It mixes with enzymes. Same thing with another one, and so on and so forth for a while until they finally spit it into that cell. So, yeah, you're eating, for lack of better words, bee vomit.
But it tastes really good.
Yeah, as far as insect vomit goes, yes, it is the tastiest.
Well, how do you harvest the honey, and how does it need to be processed for us to enjoy?
Well, first of all, we don't process it. You've heard of raw honey.
Yeah.
Raw honey is just honey that comes straight from the hive into the jar. And while I'm talking about that, we'll talk about local honey as well. Mm-hmm. So we know what raw honey is, because when I do markets, I get a lot of people coming, is your honey raw, is your honey local? They don't really understand what those two mean.
Yeah.
So raw honey just means honey that comes straight from the hive into the jar. When I have different variety of honey like you have there, they don't understand that honey in different flavors is also raw, because it's just different places, different flowers. So local honey is with honey within 50 miles of where you live. And they say that you should eat local honey because the idea is that you're developing an immunity to the pollen and nectar, the plants that you're allergic to in your area, because those are the ones that you're going to be sneezing to, and things like that. So when I harvest honey, we pull the frame out of the hive. All the frames are capped with wax. The bees cap it with wax. By the way, wax is a very, very valuable item. Beeswax, it takes 5 to 8 pounds of sugar or honey to make 1 pound of wax.
Wow.
So, so they cover it over with wax. We take a uncapper and we take the first layer of the wax off, which exposes the honey. Then we put it into a centrifuge. It's called an extractor. And we put it in that centrifuge, and it spins it around and throws the honey out. And the honey fills up the tub, and then we drain it and put it straight into a jar. Any honey that you find is processed, that's honey that's had heat to it, or that's honey that's mixed with something. That's not really good honey for you. A lot of people buy the honey because it has the natural anti-bichromyl, antioxidants and things like that you want, that are healthy for your body. But anytime you add heat to it, depending on how high the heat goes, say our body temperature, 98.6, once the honey hits that temperature, it starts breaking down at least 200 of those enzymes. The hive is normally kept at about 96 degrees. So if your honey is below 96 or below, it's still raw.
Our guest today, Robert McKinney, president of MJD Apiary in Milwaukee, as we talk with him about beekeeping and honey. And you can join in, too. Number to call, 800-642-1234. Email to ideas@wpr.org if you had any experiences yourself with hives and raising bees and making honey. I hope you'll join in, or maybe you're just thinking about starting. Give us a call with your questions. Again, 800-642-1234. Email to ideas@wpr.org. Clara Neipert is our producer today. Tyler Ditter, our technical director. I'm Larry Meiller for Wisconsin Public Radio. Thanks so much for joining us here on WPR. Larry Meiller here with my guest, Robert McKinney. Robert, president of MJD Apiary in Milwaukee. And again, questions, give a call. The number's 800-642-1234. Or you could email us, and the email address, ideas@wpr.org. And let's take some calls. Jean in Madison will give you a chance to join in. Hi, Jean.
Hi. You were talking that honeybees have specific flowers that they go to and utilize. I'm wondering if gladiolas would be one that would be helpful for bees. And I also want to note that since gladiolas only bloom July through September, is that sufficient if you don't have other flowers readily accessible? Would that work?
Are you trying to attract bees to your garden, or you're just a person who wants to just make sure you have flowers available for bees?
Flowers available for bees, and I'm just wondering if they would be, if gladiolas would work for their honey.
I think Jean likes gladiolas.
I think she does too. Gladiolas, as far as I know, I have not seen any honeybees around gladiolas, but some of our native bees I have seen around the gladiolas. The thing is, too, that bees go 5 miles in a direction. So maybe you could plant other types of flowers, even if they don't come to your garden. If you're specifically trying to draw certain bees to your garden, you might want to try like a different type of flower. But I think you're set on gladiolas for yourself.
Yeah, but you'll get some other bees coming, and then I'd just plant some other. What are some other good flowers? Or is it a pretty broad range of flowers?
There is a broad range of flowers. You can plant certain mints. There are... You got me on the spot here. There's a long list of flowers. Clover is a good one. There are like different varieties of clover, crimson clover, yellow clover, white clover, things like that. And those are good things to have, too, on your lawn.
Mm-hmm.
So
as part of your lawn, for sure. Mm-hmm. There you go, Gene. Thank you for calling. Let's go to Curtis in Milwaukee. Hi, Curtis.
Hey. Oh, appreciate you taking the call.
Sure. What's on your mind?
Overwintering bees for insulation value.
Okay.
I have R10 polystyrene.
Okay.
Wrapping
the pink stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I have R30 on the top.
All right.
And then R10 on the sides, and then I've insulated the base as well.
Okay. What do you have for ventilation? If you're going to add that much insulation on it, you got to remember, bees are experts at HVAC. So they know how to control the heat and the cold inside the hive. It's not the cold that's going to kill the hive. If you've taken care of your bees, done your treatments and everything, they should be able to sustain it. But I do understand why you're using the insulation. But when you're adding that insulation, you're also going to add moisture into the hive. So you need to make sure you have ventilation. So what are you using for that?
The 2 holes in the bottom of the base where the bees come and go.
Okay. If you're going to do that, because you have it surrounded with ventilation, you want to make sure you also have top ventilation too. Because remember, heat rises to the top. So when it rises up to the top, if you don't have any ventilation up there, you know what's going to happen? Yeah. You're going to cause a rainstorm inside your hive, and it's going to rain on those bees. And dead bees, wet bees are dead bees. So when you have that insulation on the top, the air is going to come in, and it's going to help the water dissipate.
So put some ventilation on the top. Yeah, there you go, Curtis. Thank you for calling. Let's go to Chris in Watertown. Hi, Chris.
Hi. Two things. Near Neosho, Wisconsin, there's a honey museum that also sells honey. Mm-hmm. It's a big place. I just drove past there. I work for a glass company. And then I would like your caller to make a comment about the flavor of honey made from cactus flowers or desert honey. Okay? Those are my two things, okay?
Yeah.
I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you.
I can't really comment on any cactus honey because we don't have cactus here. Yeah. So that's not something I can comment on. But yeah, I'm familiar with Honey Acres. A lot of people go there.
To see the museum.
Mm-hmm.
And what would you have in a museum? Have you been there yet?
I haven't been there, but I've heard a lot of people go there. Actually, one of my supervisor doesn't live too far from there, I guess. But yeah, I haven't made the trip.
Okay. Perry in Ocado, we'll go to you.
Yes. Is there a shelf life for honey? Does it lose some of the antioxidants over time? And once it crystallizes, what is the best and safest way to get it back to liquid?
Okay. Honey lasts forever because, remember, it's 2 parts sugar, fructose, and sucrose, so it's sugar. And in order to decrystallize it, you add it to heat. You don't want to add it to direct heat. A lot of people I see have said that they put it in a microwave. That's not what you want to do. You want to make a water bath. So you boil the water, get it hot, get it bubbling, then remove it from the heat, put the jar of honey in there, and after time it'll liquefy again. That's what you want to do to decrystallize it. But over time, I guess like anything, it loses some of its strength, but it still has the same flavor. It still has some of the same things in it that it had to begin with.
All right. There you go, Perry. Thank you for calling. Let's go to Mona in Appleton. Hi, Mona.
Hi there. Yeah, I just wanted to mention I put I have a little espresso machine. It's not anything real expensive, and it makes like a shot of coffee, and I add frothed milk and honey to my coffee. And just listening to what you said about heating it, which I've already been putting it in after I froth the milk. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it can kind of get lost, and I don't really taste it so much. So I just kind of put it on the top of the milk. It's really good. Good way to sweeten other than just sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of people when they add it to things like that, you're doing it more for the flavor than for the benefits. So, and it's interesting you say that because I am doing a coffee bean infused honey, actually 3 of them. So, yeah, it's a lot of people are using that instead of white sugar. So that's a good healthy choice.
And by the way, we've mentioned your site a couple times. What is how do people find your site? It's at
at www.mjdbees.com.
mjdbees.com. And I've been to the site. It's a pretty site. So, yeah.
Thank you.
With all kinds of good information on it. Mona, thank you very much for calling. Appreciate it. Sean emailed us. As a fellow beekeeper, he's sure you hear a lot of the same questions. He has answered so many questions about people concerned about metal spoons versus wooden spoons for getting honey out of jars. Can you enlighten listeners about metal spoons versus the little corkscrew wooden spoons that we see?
And that's funny. I get that all the time, and I'm like, we do extract the honey in stainless steel metal. So the idea, though, behind that, because I had to do some research on it, the idea behind that is that actually the honey, because it's acidic, it eats away at that metal on that spoon. So when you're dipping a spoon in there for your honey, you're not keeping it in there long enough to do any real damage or anything. So that's where that comes from.
But I do kind of like the wooden curly.
It looks nice.
It looks nice. It's kind of a cool way to get it out of the jar for sure. Oh, man. Bob emailed us. Just curious, Bob is, if honey is still sold in the individual boxes with a 6-inch, 6x6 square of comb honey. Haven't seen it on shelves in grocery stores.
You can find it. I personally don't make it because, like I said, the combed honey is honey in its purest form. You think about it in its natural wrapper. So honey and combed honey is going to taste different than honey in a jar because that honey in that comb has never hit air. So it's going to be a lot sweeter. It's going to have a better taste to it. But the thing is, like I said, because it takes so much sugar, so much time for the bees to make that wax, to put that honey in there. And then when you remove that frame and you cut it up and sell it, the bees have to go back to making it again. It's 5 to 8 pounds of sugar. So that's why it's so expensive to find it. And that's why it's so expensive to make it. You're going to pay that 6x6 piece. You're going to pay about $20, $25 for it, whereas a 1 pound bottle you might pay $12 to $18 for.
What are the challenges of raising bees in the city?
Neighbors for one. Bees in the city do a little better than they do in rural areas because of the heat island effect. The heat island effect means that, in the city we got more concrete, more asphalt and everything, so it attracts more heat. So it's a little warmer in the cities than it is in the rural areas. Out in the rural areas, I have hives out in East Troy and Hartford, so out in the rural areas, you don't have that wind block like you do with houses and buildings and things like that. And there's no concrete and everything to absorb the heat. But the biggest challenge is, one, the neighbors. Mm-hmm. Two, is the beekeeper themselves. A lot of people decide to get into beekeeping without actually getting any knowledge or getting any training into it. Everybody thinks that they can get a box and throw some bees in it and it's fine, but there is so much that goes on in that box that you need to educate yourself about before even putting that onto your property. It is a serious, serious commitment.
So the bees need a box. So what is a box like?
A box is, it's basically a box and it holds 10 frames. The idea of the box, it's called a Langstroth hive. And it was invented by Reverend Langstroth. Can't remember, Lorenzo Langstroth, that's his name. And the idea is that the box or the hive imitates the inside hollow of a tree because you know that bees naturally make their hives inside trees. So this box starts off as one box with 10 frames, and then that box fills up, you add another one to it. So the idea is that the box, to the bees at least, looks like the inside hollow of a tree.
And you add sort of one frame at a time until you get to 10, or do you have them?
No, you start off with 10 frames,
All
9
right.
and 10 frames on the bottom, and then you add more boxes as that first one fills up.
Steve in Madison has a question. Let's go there. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Larry. Say, I have a quick question on pollinator habitats. I have a buddy that he's retired and he turned his entire farm into a pollinator habitat. And I'd like to know your thoughts on them. Are there any pollinator habitats near your apiaries? Are there any advantages, disadvantages? What's the cost to the taxpayer? Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. Pollinator habitats are great. The thing is that we're talking about municipalities again. You can actually do a pollinator habitat in the city. The problem is that most cities have these restrictions where you have to have your grass a certain height and, no weeds and all this stuff and everything. But our native plants aren't as pretty as some of the ornamental plants that you buy. So the problem that you'd run into while you're doing these native habitats, which are native flowers, native grasses, things like that, which are better for your lawn because native plants, their roots are a lot deeper into the soil. So you won't get as much flooding. If you look at a golf course, which is just grass, those roots aren't that deep, so you get a lot of flooding in that. With native plants, the roots are deeper, so they're going to soak up more water. But so the problem you're going to run into is with the city because they don't They aren't naturalists, so they don't know the difference between different types of flowers. The way around that is that if you should get a citation or court or whatever, the difference between a weed and a plant is the cost. You paid for those seeds. You paid for those plants. So they're not weeds.
There you go. Steve, thank you very much for calling. We mentioned the boxes that you need. What other equipment do you need?
First and foremost, any beekeeper, I know you've seen Instagram. I know you've seen all the videos on YouTube. A bee jacket. You need a bee jacket. You need some type of protection. You need that bee jacket. You need gloves. Those are first and foremost things you need. A lot of people aren't allergic to bees, but you can develop an allergy if you get stung too many times. If you have an allergy to shellfish, chances are you may have an allergic reaction to bee stings as well. So you don't want to take that chance. One of the things I tell new beekeepers too when they get into beekeeping, tell your doctor that you're getting into beekeeping. They'll give you a prescription for an EpiPen. You may not need it, but you never know who's going to be around you that needs that EpiPen. Another thing is a hive tool, which is standard. It's a tool that you use to pull the frames out of the box. Another one is a smoker. A lot of people see the smoker, they think it makes the bees sleepy. What a smoker does, in that hive, like I said, I don't like honey, but I love the science. Inside that hive, there's 17 different pheromones that control that hive. One of those pheromones is the attack pheromone. When you get stung, and the stinger that's still inside you, it sets out a pheromone to the other bees to let them know it's a targeting system. Attack here. So that smoke does two things. It masks the attack pheromone, so that's the idea. It masks the attack pheromone so that the bees don't sting you. And the second has to deal with genetic memory, which is very awesome. I learned all this stuff from beekeeping. But genetic memory, when the bees think smoke, they think fire. So they think, okay, we have to move someplace. Because remember a few years ago when the bees were on top of the Vatican? I think it was the Vatican, and there was that fire. Well, when they smell that smoke, they think, okay, we have to move. We have to leave. So the first thing they need to do, they need to get energy to fly. So they gorge themselves on honey. They start opening the honey. They start gorging themselves on honey. And the idea is that once that abdomen is full, because the stinger comes out the butt, so I can say butt, right? Well, I said it twice. So when their abdomen is full, they can't bend their abdomen to sting you. So that's the idea. That's the second purpose of it.
Oh, my goodness me. What's the lifespan of a hive?
We're talking about hive or bees, because a hive can last for a long time. But the bees that are born in spring and summer live for 45 days. That's because the foragers, they end up dying because they go back and forth, and they die from exhaustion collecting. But in the fall, winter bees are born. Those bees are the bees that are going to help the hive survive the winter. And if you've taken care of your hive, those bees are going to survive till the spring. And their lifespan is not 45 days, it's 4 to 6 months. Because their job is inside the hive just to keep the hive warm. The queen, genetically, can live for 7 years. But after about 2 years, she just goes downhill laying, and that's due to environment and other things and things like that. But all those things done correctly, you can just keep your hive going and going and going.
So we've mentioned a few times getting stung, and neighbors worried about getting stung. I mean, how big of if somebody puts a hive next door to me, which I wouldn't mind, but if I did, I mean, what would you tell me about, I'm going to get stung? What would you say?
I, initially when I first started and I had the 2 hives in my backyard and I needed more space, I started setting up hives in other people's backyards in Milwaukee. So I would have to talk to the neighbors and explain to them there's going to be a hive over here and address their questions. And that's one of the questions a lot of people have. They think, oh, bees are here, I'm going to get stung. I had someone who, his neighbor said, that hive's been here, I haven't even seen the bees. The bees are just going to go about their business. The only time that they're going to actually sting you is if you're inside that hive. A bee on a flower or something like that, there's a less likely chance for them to sting you. So the chances of you getting stung, I'm not going to say are 0. I'm not going to say non-existent. but they're very low.
What? By the way, Gina in Montello wondered if what do you recommend for smoker materials? Her smoker is her nightmare, and she struggles getting a good smoke stream for the amount of time she needs when checking her hives.
That is a beekeeper problem. I like that. The only time your smoker smokes really good is when you're not using it. Yeah. But what I've done, because beekeeping can be expensive, what I've done is like go to these coffee shops that like Collectivo, stuff like that. They have burlap sacks, and they give them away for free. So you can cut those up and use them. As far as keeping them lit, yeah, like I said, it's you got to keep hitting those bellows when you're using it. But I've had it so many times where when I'm not using it, when I'm done for the day, the smoker stays lit. So it's there's no answer for that. There's no answer for that.
Well, that could be frustrating. I imagine beekeeping at times can be frustrating. What's your advice for beginners to finding peace when they're working with bees?
You know what? Beekeeping in itself is peaceful. There's a guy who I helped last year who was he's a vet and he had PTSD. And a few years ago, I had worked with some veterans on this too. The whole idea of beekeeping is this: for PTSD and stress and depression and things like this. The whole thing is when you're inside that hive, it's just you. It's just you. All the rest of the world is shut out. And you're focusing on that task and what you're doing, and you're looking at those bees, and you're just there in the moment. And that's where you find your peace. Of course, you got people next to you who are going to be asking questions like I do all the time, but still, it is a very peaceful thing.
So MJD Apiary, what's again your website?
www.mjdbees.com.
MJDbees with an S, bees.com. Right? Did I get it right?
You got it right.
Well, I'll tell you what, Robert, it's been a great pleasure talking with you today. Hope we can do this again. Thank you so much.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Robert McKinney, our guest. He's president of MJD Apiary in Milwaukee, and he's been doing this for a while now. And he knows a lot. It was fun talking with him about bees and his honey, which I'm sure we'll be sampling in the not-too-distant future. Thanks again, Robert. Appreciate it very much. Coming up, we're going to take a look at improv comedy on this April Fool's Day. I'm Larry Meiller for Wisconsin Public Radio. Great to have you with us on Wisconsin Public Radio. Larry Meiller here. We're starting the show by talking with you about beekeeping, and we are lucky to have Robert McKinney with us. He's president of MJD Apiary in Milwaukee. Robert keeps his own hives. He produces honey and mentors novice beekeepers. And as we talk with him, I hope you'll join in, wondering how you can start your own beehive, or maybe you have some hives and have questions for Robert about them. Maybe you've got an experience to share. Give us a call. The number is 800-642-1234, 1-800-642-1234, or you could email us. The email address, ideas@WPR.org.